Labyrinths. For as long as I can remember, I've had a fascination with those elaborate, mystical, transformative structures said to have first been built for King Minos of Crete some 4,000 years ago. Dating back more than 4 millennia, these ancient archetypes have come to be understood as tools for personal, psychological, and spiritual transformation. And on today's program, the insightful Andrea Savar and Nicole Kincaid are back to help us talk about them. And if you stick around until the end of the show, we're going to tell you how you can get a backstage pass to a full week of classes by some of the most respected practitioners of herbal witchcraft, folk magic, divination, kitchen witchery, stregoneria, hermeticism, Catholic conjure, and more. I'll see you on the other side of this intro.
And we are back, hiding in retreat centers and ashrams and even people's backyards and parks throughout the world. Some of the most beautiful estates around the world. We find these beautiful structures shrouded by trees deep in the forest, or as I said, on the riverfront. Labyrinths can be found all over the world. And today we're lucky to have back with us Nicole Kincaid and our own Andrea Savar to help us explore how these ancient technologies can be used for personal transformation and healing, spiritual insight, and re-energizing ourselves in ways that we may not have considered possible before. So thank you for being here tonight, and welcome, Andrea and Nicole.
Thank you. And I just want to say one thing too, is yesterday was International Labyrinth Day.
What?
Was it really? Did you do this on purpose?
Totally unplanned.
That is so awesome.
And one other tidbit, there's a Labyrinth Finder app that you can use.
Really?
Yes, for your area, that will find like the closest labyrinths within like a 10-mile radius. Kind of a thing. So
cool.
Very, very cool. So Nicole, I know that part of the reason why we invited you back was when last time you were on the show, we mentioned and put you on the spot and said, we got to continue this conversation and talk about this. Talk a little bit about your work with helping people to discover and kind of unlock the potential that exists in labyrinths, and how you first actually even tapped in, because I think everybody has everybody that works with the labyrinth has a labyrinth story.
That's so true, right? So my work is all about energy, as you two know, and I do that via space clearing, and I do it via my other side of the coin, I call it, is stuffology. But I first came across the labyrinth, the concept and the notion of it. I mean, I really had not heard of it, honestly, until like 20 years ago. And I was doing postgraduate work at Bastyr University up here in Seattle, Washington. And they had a part in that program all on Labyrinth. And I was listening to the speaker talk about it. And I was like, oh, wow, this has been around a really long time. I mean, we were learning all kinds of subjects. So I was like nodding my head and taking it in very, with my mind, right? But then the very next day in class, they had erected, this is at Bastyr University, they had erected a giant labyrinth in one of the halls at Bastyr, and we all got to experience it, and I was blown away. I mean, first of all, I didn't even know that seriously, this was 20 years ago, but I didn't know there was a difference between a maze and a labyrinth, and yes, there is, and that labyrinths are unicursal, so there's one way in and one way out, but what happens with your whole mind, body, spirit when you're in a labyrinth. I mean, I would go as far to say, to me, it's like a portal, and you have an invitation to have a mystical experience. in the labyrinth, and I was not expecting that on my first walkabout, and it was really, really powerful. And then when the very, I think, first time I met Andrea, I was like, we just launched into this conversation because there was a spot on her property that she was selling where I was like, can't you just see a labyrinth here? I was like, really just like, it was kind of like I could just see it right. I mean, I was just fixated on this spot on that property that I wanted to put a labyrinth there.
It really was. Same for me. It was maybe about 20 years ago. And I can turn this, if I'm getting feedback here, let me turn maybe the volume down there. I think it was same thing as Nicole, like it was maybe 25 years ago, maybe a little longer, that I saw, I'd always heard of Labyrinths, of course, being a child of the 80s, there was the movie, but I never really experienced actually walking in a labyrinth until I moved to Europe. And when I first saw one of the actual ones in one of the castle gardens, that was kind of my first experience. And it's very similar to what Nicole said. I initially was not aware of what I was really unlocking when I walked in. And as I was doing each turn and each meander and making my way to the center and then finding my way back out, I was really, it struck me how it was very much the way that we kind of, in some of our Italian traditions, we unknot things, or we knot things, but this was more of an unknotting or an unraveling and feeling all of these different experiences as we kind of turned and made our way back out. So that was my first experience of it. And then I would see them in the churches, like there's one in Chartres, one of the very well-known ones when you first walk in the cathedral door, as a way of being a pilgrimage of sorts without having to leave.
Yeah, and for me, actually, the Labyrinth at Chartres was one of the first places that I actually experienced it, and I remember thinking. And by the way, for those who are watching, please know that it is not us that's causing this feedback. They just upgraded some things on the platform, and so it's made it so that I think in the future we're all just going to have to wear headphones, because there's something going on, and it seems like that's the only way it goes away. But we're doing what we can, and hopefully we'll keep it to a minimum. I'll see if maybe if I do on my end, if I mute everybody who's not talking, we'll see if that helps. I just don't know. But yeah, I remember thinking, wow, this is kind of like another another technology, very much like a mandala. That it seemed like that labyrinth was not just imprinted upon who I was, but was somehow an extension of who I was. And that was where the journey began. At first I thought, oh, so this is just a different version of a mandala, but it's not a different version of a mandala. A labyrinth is actually unlocking stuff, I thought, in me. So I have to unlock this because I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. I do think there is that unknotting, that unlocking it in, and also it kind of, there's two sides of the same coin too, when you think about kind of like what Nicole was saying. It also depends on what you're going in to meet that you end up discovering. Like, I feel like if you're waiting to meet the Minotaur, you meet the Minotaur. If you're, and it depends on how you perceive that aspect of yourself. I feel like one of the ways of healing that and unlocking it is coming kind of face to face with it, and then moving out. Kind of similar to what Nicole had mentioned on the last show was, when we were talking about certain energies that may seem hostile. Are you going in to meet the Minotaur with that expectation, or are you going in to meet the frightened child? And can you work with it in that way instead of expecting a monster part of yourself? you know, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. When I was first introduced to it, and I've heard lots of different people say different ways of using the labyrinth, but I was always, I mean, my first teaching around it was to pose a question, right? It was, and I've heard some people say, oh, just have an intention or just go and see what happens in it. But I, for some reason, liked that intent, like that question idea. And each, I mean, and I've been like, okay, so labyrinths aren't, I mean, they're an amazing tool. I mean, they're an amazing, not just tool, but like mystical experience available to you, but they're not that readily available. It's not like you can just wheel one out in your like living room, you know what I mean? But you can totally like pick one up and then use it with your finger. And this is like a more complex one, of course. I mean, there's different versions of them, but I wish that, I guess I'm so happy that we're having this conversation because I wish more people realized that it's when I have gone into a labyrinth, it is almost like it shuts down that egoic part of me. And I just bypass, it's almost like it just goes whoop. And I just go right into like that more expansive or like that more mystical part of me with no filters, right? And then, you know, there's been times when I've been sharing the labyrinth with other people, and you know, I feel like I'm always kind of aware of what's going on around me, and oh, excuse me, or you know, like if I'm in public places, but I have just, I mean, I hope this is really compelling to some people because it's so amazing to walk into a labyrinth and feel like I just was completely unaware of anyone else around me. And then like the deeper I got into it, and this happens over and over, I would just be like lightly posing, you know, like, here's my question, here's what's up. I'm wondering what's up for me around this. What do I need to know about this, or how do I approach this, or whatever the question, whatever my inquiry was, right? And then all of a sudden, like I would just be walking and then I'd look up and I'm like, I have no idea where I'm at in the labyrinth. Like I'm like, am I on the clockwise? I'm on the counterclockwise? Like, where am I? And I'm just like, okay, it's working on me. Like I feel like it very much works on you when you're in it.
Doesn't it kind of feel like it, and it feels to me, or would be fair to say for you, it feels like it's another space. Like
Yeah.
it's a different, like
Yeah.
people think it's schmaltzy to say, but it feels like you go into a different dimension when you step foot in there. And it doesn't require, it has nothing to do with us like being enlightened or awakened or any of that stuff. You walk in and it just pops you into this different dimension.
Well said.
I agreed. And
now, folks, anyone who's watching, by the way, if you want to share your first experience of a labyrinth, you know, please feel free to do that. And I see Nicole just had to go lock the Minotaur up.
right.
So
My headset, and it's not where it's supposed to be. Sorry about that.
I think we're good. Andrea, you were about to say something.
Oh, I forgot, but sorry, guys. I think what Nicole was saying too, just about, well, one of the things that struck me just when Nicole was saying that, and I'd never really considered it, but it's almost like a type of divination tool if you're going in with an inquiry. And I've never thought of the labyrinth as a divinatory tool, but in many ways it is. That's awesome. That never even clicked for me. And now that's kind of another aha. And I just feel like when it comes to the portal aspect too, and what John Michael was saying about it being like a technology that it's really not, it's outside of us, and it kind of pops us into that other space. I do often wonder about, the initial designs as they went into place. It's very much, for me, someone who loves mathematics and geometry, that it does have that appearance of being a macro version of other aspects of our own mind, nature. It's almost like a way of mirroring very much those systems. And I hope again, I had my second dose of Pfizer a couple days ago, guys, and I'm just like, my brain is mush, so I apologize. But there's something about it, that the way that it's designed and the numbers, and that going in on the third path, the third path in, and coming out on the seventh, I believe. Like, all of these things have sacred numerology associated with them, as well as sometimes they're associated with the planets. Like, there's all of these different overlays and overlays that to me don't seem random.
Oh no.
And on some, would you say, since you are our resident math guru, would you say too? I know that in some of the labyrinth designs, for me, the first thing I see when I look at the design at a distance almost looks like the sacred geometry of the brain itself, and I don't think that's accidental.
I completely agree. And that's something that I've had, other friends, like my friend Emily did a class on labyrinths, that she mentions too. Like, there is this curious resemblance to the brain, which I don't think is curious at all. I think it's very, very, very much planned, because we are entering into that space that is a portal to self, a portal to all. It has that time feels a little different. Space feels a little different when you're walking it. The turns can be a little bit, I feel like it's those moments when you're, left brain, right brain, maybe moving through that consciousness. But there's so many layers. I think that's the thing. It's not just, and it can be different for every single person that walks it. Like, that's what's so beautiful about it.
Now, I had a question, I think Andrea talked on, or touched on for you, Nicole, because I've never even remotely thought about using a labyrinth for divination, and I think that's brilliant. And tell us a little bit about your process for doing that, because I want to do it, but I even with the seed planted that it can be used for divination, I have no clue how I would even do that.
I'm like so confused right now. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, good. And I'm hoping it cut down that noise, because like, here's the deal. I've never not used it for that. So I'm like, what are people using it for?
I think for me, just that's a good thing to, I mean, like, that's probably such a great conversation, because there's probably people watching who are saying the same thing. Like, why else did you go in there? For me, it was an more for an experience to tap into the untapped mind, and sort of to kind of be almost a mindfulness practice of shutting all of the noise down, and then being with that higher wisdom. So as I'm saying that, I'm saying, all right, you dope. Why didn't you just think, if you're tapping into higher wisdom, why wouldn't you use it for divination?
Yeah.
So I could see why you think that's crazy.
It's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know, because it's like such a personal experience that I have in the labyrinths, and so it's not something that I've been, I'm like asking if I'm there's one right downtown Seattle too. You can just pull off the freeway and there's a cathedral, and I can't remember which one it is, but I have actually like pulled over and seen like a parking spot and then like gone in, but everyone's quiet and very reverent when they're in there, and so I don't ever know what anybody else is going in there for, but I do know that I have always had a question. I've always, approached it in the way of like, what is the highest interest in with regard to this situation in my life, or what needs to be changed in me at this time to remove this block in my life? Like, there's always been, sort of these like, high grade questions that I've had, like I kind of have felt like in moments of need often when I've gone to the labyrinth, because sometimes they're like not that easy to get to, right? There's also one on not Whidbey Island, but Vashon Island, which is just a little bit that you can and it's just to the left, like when you're just on your heading to town. And so I've always felt like really like like, for example, you're not going to get to Chartres Cathedral very often, so you're going to make
Right.
the best of your time while you're there. Like, oh, I'm going to really make the most bang for my buck when I'm at, like, I'm going to really like get it, and so that's kind of how I feel about the Labyrinth, because they're not, you don't see them every day. And so I almost feel like I have this moment to have a holy experience, and that intention has then kind of primed me for going and saying I'm going to have some resolve by the end of this, and just knowing that to be true, knowing that I'm going to dip into the magic and the mysticism and the information that's available, that's going to come through me, and it's going to and then I am going to be the receiver of that, and then it's unfolding, and immediately when I get out of it, I'm writing, because I know I need to capture what just happened, or it'll just flee like a little bit of like a dream, when if you don't capture it, in that first hour or two, some of the details start to kind of dissipate. But that has been, I guess now that you've said that, John Michael, like, I know people just use it more meditatively. I don't know that anybody uses it for fun. I don't know about that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's not fun, but that's definitely not been the energy that I've gone into the Labyrinth with. I mean, there's some levity in it, but it's always been, I've always had, and I've always just felt like I needed to respect that I needed to go in with a really clear inquiry and not be murky in my end of it. And so there's this relationship there, I think, of how I'm entering into that portal.
And does that download of insight come while you're in the Labyrinth, or is it something you experience as you leave, when the experience is over?
Yeah, it's like a it's kind of like when I clear energy, in a way, where I start to get different pictures of what's going on. And then like the film all comes together in the end. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, but I don't know what it means. And I don't have the wherewithal when I'm in the Labyrinth to really assemble it anyway, because I'm not in that, that part of my functioning is offline. That's the purpose. I mean, that's what happens when I go into Labyrinth, is like if you ask me to write something in there, like cogent, like, I pledge allegiance to, I wouldn't be able to do it. I'm in my left, right? Or I'm in my right. See, I'm mixing them up because I'm thinking about the Labyrinth. But but pictures are available to me, and imagery. And so I'm like, oh, just like, oh, that's interesting. And then I just almost feel a little dreamy in there. And then when I come out, I like to have a journal that doesn't have any lines in it. And I just write and write and write. And something emerges, and I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I had it just seems so like a level of unknown comes through in a way that I hadn't expected usually. And I usually laugh. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is, what did I think of that?
Well, I think you kind of hit on it perfectly by saying that dream-like sensation, because I feel like when you are in there, at least for me, it is like going into your subconscious. It's like all of a sudden you are in a very different part of your being, and you're bringing that subconscious forward. And for me, it was almost like I didn't necessarily go with a clear question, especially the first times. I think for me, it was more I had stuff going on in my life, or there was this draw there for whatever reason in those different moments. And in France, it was, there were quite a few of them, so it was pretty easy to find one when I needed it. And it was almost like when I would have these really complex math problems, and I would, I'd have all these ideas sort of beginning to constellate, but not quite connecting. And so being able to tap into that subconscious aspect would bring it together into something much clearer. Usually when I had a math problem that was not coming together, I would go to sleep for maybe like a nap, like a 30-minute nap. And usually I could wake up and I would know how to do it. And it was the same thing, but on a more emotional level, going into the Labyrinth, was tapping into those those feelings that were beginning to clarify, but I couldn't quite put it together entirely. And the Labyrinth did that for me. I didn't consider it nation. Like I didn't even think of it that way. It was very much like a healing walk, but a journey into those parts of my mind that I wasn't able to access in an awake state.
Yeah, and in a movement state too.
Yes.
And I think the movement is very, I mean, something happens to us when we move. And meditation doesn't work well for everyone in that sitting still way because it's not activating enough. And so I find the Labyrinth to be so conducive to like almost like a walking meditation. And a lot of people are agreeing, like, it's not really meditating if you're walking. And I'm like, it is when you're in the Labyrinth.
Yeah, it is. And that's for me, that's what the whole experience was for me. But I'm listening to what both of you were saying, and like the light bulbs going on in my head that if you bring that intention, that you're going to get clarity. You know, where my entry was as an abbot at a Buddhist monastery, and we had just done a retreat with a bunch of Catholic and Buddhist monks, and the entire weekend was telling them empty your mind and empty your mind and empty your mind. So nobody went in there thinking, okay, let's bring a single intention. That's just like emptying your mind, only now you're focused solely on one thing, and you're going to get clarity. So I can't wait to get our next Labyrinth. I want to say for folks, I know that traditionally at this time of year, actually earlier this year than in years past, when the weather starts to get nice, our live views are dramatically cut in half. So we're not getting comments, but I know we'll get swamped with comments afterwards later tonight when people are back home. But I want to share with everybody, if anyone has a desire to see if there's a Labyrinth near them. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to Nicole and saying, damn it, I told Craig we should move to Seattle. Because the closest one for me is down in Maryland, that I know of, that I've been to. But there is on the screen in front of you, the Labyrinth Society has an incredible database up on their website called labyrinthlocator.com. If you want to find out if there's a Labyrinth, within a couple hours drive of you, and my experience has always been that drive there, like I think like Nicole said, it can be just as rich a part of the experience of I'm going to go have this sacred experience. And it just, I don't know, to me, it's part of the wonder of the experience itself is we're going to the Labyrinth. Go to that site, labyrinthlocator.com, and it'll tell you if there's one near you. And they've got listings all over the world.
And here's an idea, and this is just because I have a small child at home, and I've never done it, but now I'm kind of thinking maybe I will for fun. Sidewalk chalk, draw one out. Like even the process of drawing it can be something incredibly fascinating. Like just drawing the movements can be something that it also unlocks. Like Nicole showed the printed versions of it too, where you can just move your finger through it. And I know my friend Emily, who is a child psychologist, she uses a wooden board that has one where you can put your finger in it when kids need to find something to help calm them. And she says every time, it works. So there's something very magical about it.
Talk about that. That was a perfect segue into my next question for both of you, because I'm thinking not only for children, but for adults who have high stress situations, adults looking for insight, adults, maybe even adults on the spectrum, who are having difficulty, bringing about that single focus. That version that Nicole pulled up, those two versions, talk about how you do that with, a labyrinth on paper and tracing it with your finger, or tracing it with, I'm thinking, if you have your trusty crystal and you trace it with the crystal to gain some insight, this is the one I use on my pendulum. Give us some insight, because I know for some folks, the idea of even walking a labyrinth is foreign. But that makes it so much more accessible that we can put beneath the playback for the show. I'll pull up some of those online PDFs that people can download.
Yeah. I actually pulled these out of my binder from my class that I went to, and because I still had them, and I honestly don't use these versions very often, because there is just something a little bit, there's something really sacred for me about doing it live, and I think about, like, if Labyrinth is its own entity, its own signature, it has its own vibratory nature of, like you said this, and I knew that too, around 4,000 years of history. Like, I want to walk into that when I'm stepping onto Mother Earth, and I want to, because I feel that that vibratory historical nature I'm getting chills, like, has been compounding, and like, so every person that enters into a Labyrinth experience then adds to that signature, and that we can have an experience of it. I will say, though, that I do have a friend who had a traveling labyrinth, and it was on a big sheet of canvas, and she could condense it down to, like, the size of, like, I don't know, but like 18 inches by 18 inches, and it was beautiful. And I don't know where she bought it. I'm sure there's plenty online, but I love that idea, Andrea, of the woman with the children and tracing those fingers, because it was what you said too, Andrea, around it. The labyrinth is very much accessing our subconscious and accessing our own grooves and our own material, our own inner wisdoms, and our connection to that oneness in ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
And it can be used as much, we talk about the download of insight, which I'm now obsessed with. I know I'll probably say it 10 more times before we're done. I literally just want to, like, say, okay, you guys keep talking. I'm getting in the car and going to Maryland. That's going to happen this week. I just have to tell you that I'm so looking forward to that, because there is an issue that I would like some insight on. But something that other people can, I think may inspire some folks to go check out a labyrinth too, is, for me personally, it's been an incredible place to I think safely encounter the shadow, to do shadow work in an environment where, you want to go meet the Minotaur, go meet the Minotaur. Make sure you're ready. But it's always seemed for me to be a safe space, a safer space to do shadow work than just kind of opening the can of worms and, sitting on the cushion and saying, let's see what kind of shit comes up today, where I can step into that sacred space. And because it is other dimensional, it just seems like, okay, this is, it's, and to Andrea's point, what made me first do that was seeing the film years after we were in Chartres, seeing the film Labyrinth and saying, oh, there's shadow work to be done here. Yeah. And so I got as obsessed as I am right this moment, and was like, next time I go to a labyrinth, I'm going to try and do some shadow work and see what happens. Have either of you found that to be an awesome spot for doing that kind of work as well?
For me, yes, absolutely. I've definitely seen it as that type of a mechanism in my life, and something that I think I've noticed some things come up a lot, kind of in the online sphere. There's been a lot of people talking about shadow people and seeing shadow people in their homes, and seeing shadow, like a more of an abundance of shadow people. And for me, I've always thought, well, that's you. In a way, it's what we're seeing, we're reflecting, like there's all of these, and they may very well be a separate entity as well. I'm not going to eliminate that possibility either. But there is an aspect of, am I fearful of the shadow that I'm seeing in my corner? Or am I going to maybe try to walk that labyrinth and decide where I need to meet that shadow and how I can integrate that or release some of that as well? Like where can I move these types of energies? And there is something about the way that the labyrinth is this very specific grid. And I do think that there is a way of moving things out to release in a very different way. If that
totally makes sense.
I've always felt like, if anything, I've gone in shadowy, and like I'm like really good around inducing shadow in my life anyway, and I've always I haven't met shadow along the way in the labyrinth. I feel like, if anything, like the labyrinth has been a source of light for me and just clarity and like cutting through my own and my own misperceptions that are making me very wavy and shadowy. And I always feel a sense of humbleness when I come out of it, around like, almost like I'm meeting my true, soft, perfect, human self out that end, the other end of it, and that I feel so strongly supported by that universal force that can hold it all, but that shines brightly. And so I guess I kind of feel really fortified when like, I knew I wasn't so bad, or I knew it wasn't such a bad situation, or like, I knew there was an answer. Like I feel I haven't had to endure a lot of dark forests, scary forests in the labyrinth personally.
I think you just helped me again. Thank you again to find words for something I was really, in my last comment, struggling to find. And that is for me, going when I would go into the labyrinth, my personal philosophy of what shadow is fragmentation of who we are. And the labyrinth, by allowing you in that safe space to encounter wherever that fragment is. For some people, they're like Andrea said, they're so obsessed with the shadows in their house. Oh, there's shadows following me everywhere. Well, that's because you're there. So they're, it allows them to reintegrate the shadow. For others who are, not making fun of any of our viewers who are goth, but who are, all about, it's only all about shadow and, the, black nail polish. I mean, so see my goth friends. Yeah. But it helps you then to reintegrate the light so that you're actually learning that all of life is this interplay and that you are this integrated person that encompasses shadow and light. And I think, Nicole, you just put it in a really beautiful way, as always, that you're bringing your shadowiness in, and as you're leaving an integrated person, a fully integrated person, fully aware. John Powell would say, fully human, fully alive. Like the aha moments happen when we come back to our true nature. We come back to our innate, pure awareness and pure love. And so thank you for that, because that was something I've always tried to like find a way to say it. And if I just frame it in what my experience was in the labyrinth, that may not be as helpful to somebody who's coming from the opposite place and say, oh, well, then I don't need to go there because I experience my shadow all the time. Maybe that's true. But then do you ever like experience your solar energy? If you're only experiencing the shadow, this might be the place where you experience the light. If you only experience the light, I think of like dozens of white lighters at every gift shop in Salem who, might be able to step into a labyrinth and experience something that we don't even know we're missing till we do it. Like, I never would have thought that there was anything. I mean, I had done sand mandalas, and I'd been to, you know, humongous mandalas and the places that mandalas were made to represent. So when we were going into the cathedral, I was like, I hope this is helpful for these guys, because like, this is just going to be another walking meditation. That's what I thought it was going to be. And it is so not just another walking. I mean, it is a walking meditation, but it's not just another walking meditation.
I heard this one woman talk about a labyrinth one time, and she was like, so what happens in a labyrinth? Like, what's going on? And she goes, or what if you go in there and nothing happens at all? And she goes, I'm here to tell you, nothing never happens. And I was like, bingo. Because I mean, you might even the next day just like have like something that goes, oh my gosh, something just fit into place, or you might have that aha moment. But I don't think that you can. I mean, I don't think anybody just hops, skips, and jumps like accidentally into a labyrinth. And so if you're walking in there, you're gonna get something is going to happen for you. Is my belief.
Some part of you knows what the intention is before you even go.
And on like a purely superficial type of level, one of the things that I've always found so interesting is when you go to different ones around the world, there's, you know, some that have something in the center of the labyrinth, depending on where you are. And it's always fascinating to me to see what kind of resides there. People sometimes leave things behind. They'll leave little notes. They'll leave keepsakes. I know a lot of people who are grieving will leave something from a loved one. Like so to me, it's also, you're doing this journey, but you're also, like Nicole said before, journeying where others have also walked and added to that energy. And one of my very favorite labyrinths near where I used to live in France, and unfortunately, they took down the statue that was at the center now, so it's no longer there. But it had, the first time I saw it, I walked in and got to the middle, and there was this huge statue of Faunus in the center of the labyrinth. And I was like, it was such a moment for me. And I just kind of sat there before I started back out. And so it had this incredible voice of the forest moment, I think, for me. But I loved watching, like seeing how in all these different spaces, how people have left little remnants behind.
Well, we are, Ellen has a comment here and says, fascinating conversation. I'd love to experience a labyrinth. Love the idea of safe space for shadow work. So again, Ellen, I think that would be a great, it might be a really great experience for you to check out that website. I'll put it up on the screen again, because I know that in the Toronto area, and so I think near you that you may find a surprising number. I wouldn't be surprised with how just kind of the spiritual energy of Toronto. I would be shocked were there not some labyrinths somewhere near you. But we are at the 43-minute mark. I did promise everybody, and we have a class right after this, but I did promise everybody, that there was going to be a special bonus for you watching tonight, for folks who want to have a week to play around with some of the most amazing classes that are being offered. At the end of the show tonight, I will put up on the screen a link to a website where you can go. I'm trying to do it. I suck at talking and looking at the same time, especially with no glasses on. On the screen there, at the bottom of the screen there, Nicole, you see inneralchemy.online/collective. And if you'll go there, we've got an opportunity for everybody to take a free week of playing around in the classrooms, poking around, getting a chance to know some of the various faculty and adjunct faculty members that are there, and see if it feels like a good fit for you. There will be there are also there's a classroom in there called Witch Talks, which is our version of TED Talks. that includes all of these interviews with people like Nicole that we've done over the last couple years. So it's an opportunity not just to hear from our faculty and adjunct faculty, but my secret agenda is that as people go in there and say, oh, we love everything Nicole does, that we can go to Nicole and say, you should really be an adjunct faculty member. But you could do that. We'll put up on the screen a little more information at the end of the show. Nicole, I just want to thank you again so much. Having you on is just a delight, and we always run out of time.
We do. I can come back.
And it reinforces my need to move to the Pacific Northwest. Andrea, again, thank you so much too.
Thank you.
I know it's not easy on the weekends with little ones, so we really appreciate it. And then get some rest after your vaccine. Congratulations on your vaccine.
Thank you.
And I love and appreciate both of you, and all of you that are watching. We love and appreciate you too. Keep the conversation going in the comments, and we'll be sure to check those as well. And so for everybody who's watching, I forget I should actually, it wouldn't be that difficult for me to look and see who our guest was going to be next week before the show starts. That would be a whole different level of intelligence. But next week, how could I forget? Next week is somebody we don't get to see very often on here. Zia Angelina Serafina Tutacosa is going to be our guest on the show, talking about some of the big issues that are affecting the LGBTQ community. And so that's next week at the same time. Andrea and Nicole, thank you so much. I love you. And we'll talk to everybody soon. Take care.
Bye.
Awesome. Bye.